Alrighty, party peoples of the interwebs, it is Sunday. That means this is your pre-Sunday night Viva and Barnes Law Extravaganza car vlog, talking about something that I didn't get to cover this week, the superseding indictment by that corrupt mercenary of a hack, Jack Smith, in that corrupt court system, DC. For those of you who are new to the channel, I am Viva Frei, David Freihead, a former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, doing one of my trademark copyrighted car vlogs in my car. It's a rainy Sunday afternoon here in Florida, which actually makes it a little bit easier to do a car vlog because I won't schwitz like a pig in this car. And if you haven't heard about the superseding indictment coming out of DC, I don't know where you've been, but I'm going to give you a bit of a breakdown that's going to be a little more enlightening than that crap you're going to see in the Washington Compost, which we're going to read right now. And my goodness, do you hear that thunder? Now, before we even get into that mind rot from the Washington Compost, the 30,000-foot overview for those of you who may not be following quite what is happening out of D.C. Trump was indicted on that insurrection-type bullcrap. The charges of trying to overturn the election. Yes, Jack Smith, that DOJ Biden administration goon, filed an indictment against Donald Trump. He had the insurrection case in D.C. He had the classified documents case in Florida. He had the RICO nonsense in the state of Georgia. But the Supreme Court just came down with a ruling on immunity that said that there is not only immunity on official presidential acts, so you got to get clear in the indictment what is an official presidential act and what is not. Not only is there immunity on official presidential acts, but you cannot admit as evidence that was adduced as relates to an official presidential act. So Jack Smith's political persecution of an indictment was probably going to get tossed as a result of that Supreme Court ruling. So what does Jack Smith do? He files a superseding indictment that replaces the original indictment, that is tapered down a little bit, that excludes some of the allegations that probably would have gotten tossed as a result of the Supreme Court ruling on immunity, and that excludes some of the evidence that also would have met with some judicial pushback as a result of that Supreme Court ruling. So now, instead of that DC case getting tossed, the superseding indictment basically starts from new, and we have an entirely new schedule. It's going to take a long time to decide what to do with the superseding indictment, and Jack Smith just bought a lot of time in this case so that they can continue to treat Trump like the criminal that he isn't. From the Washington Compost, the Trump cases. With Trump indictment appeal, Jack Smith launches final pre-election moves. Revised indictment against Donald Trump shows careful legal maneuvering as the special counsel tries to keep the election interference case alive. It's truly amazing. One man's political persecution, weaponizing of all aspects of the judiciary, is another man's legal maneuvering. But now let's hear how Washington Compost describes that legal maneuvering. Special counsel Jack Smith tried to strike a careful balance in the revised indictment he brought against Donald Trump on Tuesday, hoping to salvage enough of his election interference case to get it to a jury without running afoul of the Supreme Court's new and vague definition of presidential immunity. Hey jackasses, it wasn't vague. Official constitutional core conduct of the president, immunity. Purely personal acts, no immunity. Somewhere in the middle, you've got to do something of an analysis to determine whether or not it benefits from presidential immunity, and you're not allowed adducing as evidence conduct that was done in the context of official acts as president. Not opaque, not ambiguous, not vague, unless you're an idiot. A day earlier, Smith filed an appeal in his other prosecution of the former president, hoping to resurrect the classified documents indictment that a trial judge had thrown out. In both instances, Smith is trying to nurse back to health cases with potentially fatal ailments. In Florida, a set of charges dismissed by a highly skeptical Trump appointee. In D.C., a case of alleged election obstruction that the nation's highest court has already amputated once and may do so again. Yeah, that other case, the classified documents case, was the one tossed by Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida, who determined that Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed as special counsel because he never went through any process to be nominated, appointed as special counsel, and she tossed that case, and now Jack Smith is trying to resurrect back to health something that might be mortally wounded to begin with. Yeah, Washington Compost, that's not corruption, that's just good legal maneuvering to bring back to life a case that is dead on its feet. Later on in the article, quote, they really tracked as closely as they could to what the instructions were from the Supreme Court's majority opinion, said Mary McCord, who served as acting assistant attorney general for national security during the Obama administration. Quote, you see that through what they eliminated and what they added, end quote. Smith had little choice but to remove from the indictment the damaging evidence that Trump allegedly tried to strong-arm his Justice Department to support his false claims of voter fraud, according to legal experts. The Supreme Court made clear in its opinion that such interactions between a president and his Justice Department are, quote, absolutely immune from prosecution. But whether Smith should have kept or removed other evidence is less obvious. Core constitutional acts of the president as president are absolutely immune, period. You also cannot adduce as evidence that was adduced from official presidential conduct. Not very complicated, but Jack Smith needs this indictment at all costs to salvage whatever political persecution they might still have against Donald Trump. And Jack Smith has to salvage it in a manner that would resist it getting dismissed as a result of the Supreme Court ruling on immunity and evidence relating to that immunity. So Jack needed to file this superseding indictment basically to get away from the original flawed indictment, to put one forward that would resist in as much as possible getting dismissed as a result of the Supreme Court ruling. A lengthening calendar. The potentially fatal blows to Trump's 2 federal indictments have indefinitely delayed both cases, and that's good for the former president. His strategy always has been to push the criminal trials beyond the 2024 election, according to people familiar with his legal team's work. It is the iron law of woke projection. Bullcrap. What they're admitting to here is that the prosecution strategy in all of this has always been to rush this through in as much as possible prior to the 2024 election, so they can hopefully get their conviction to try to raise whatever arguments they wanted to remove Trump from the ballot and other things. The idea that this case could have ever been pushed through at such a rapid pace prior to the November election itself was an absurdity. It was what they were trying to do from the very beginning. Just get a conviction somewhere, and luckily they got one out of New York so that they could run with the convicted felon bullcrap moniker until the November election. Trump is not trying to delay anything here whatsoever. They are pushing forward with bullcrap persecutions, and doing it at a rate that is unheard of so they can try to get their conviction before the election. And now, as a result of the Supreme Court ruling and the fact that they basically have to start from scratch, they can't do that anymore, but they're going to blame it on Trump and his delay tactics. According to people familiar with his team's legal work, oh my goodness, only the Washington Compost could write such crap. The drawn-out schedule could be a political boon for Trump. The 2 federal cases and 2 state indictments brought against him last year improved his standing during the Republican primaries, with Trump successfully portraying himself as a victim to his base. He is separately trying to stave off his mid-September sentencing in his New York State hush money trial, in which a jury found him guilty of falsifying business records connected to a hush money payment before the 2016 election to conceal an alleged sexual relationship with a porn actress. It's amazing. The more they try to wrongfully and unlawfully prosecute Donald Trump, the more he rises in the polls. Maybe you should stop trying to wrongly prosecute him, you dumbasses. These scoundrels desecrate every aspect of the judicial system, the legal system, the media system. They desecrate all aspects of a free society, turning it into nothing more than a third world banana republic whatever, and then they blame Trump for thriving off the consequences of their malicious prosecution. Here's an idea. Just stop maliciously persecuting him. I know it's hard to do. Maybe just give it a thought. It's still unclear how Trump's legal issues will impact him with voters in the general election. Hours after Smith filed the superseding indictment, Trump was already using it as a fundraising opportunity. He sent 3 pitches to donors. Quote, "Now they're after me again with another hoax," end quote. He wrote in one fundraising email. Quote, "But I will never surrender," end quote. Absolutely amazing confession through projection. When he uses the malicious persecution as a fundraising tactic, he is to blame. When they use it as a fundraising tactic through Authentic HQ, you know, that company that the daughter of Judge Juan Marchand in the New York case, when they use it to raise funds for Adam Schiff for brains, for other Democrat PACs, for Kamala Harris, well, then they are in the right, because they are actually just invoking Trump's criminality to raise funds for themselves. If they could not project, I don't think they would be able to speak. But the bottom line, the superseding indictment tamps down the allegations, tamps down some of the evidence, drops some of the defendants. It's now going to add a slew of additional delays, but they get to drag this thing out into November 2024 and beyond instead of having it dismissed beforehand. So Jack Smith, that mercenary hack that he is, can get the pat on the back that he so desperately craves from this corrupt administration. But the bottom line, everybody sees through it, and that is exactly why Trump is rising in the polls and not sinking as a result of all of this weaponized, malicious prosecution. Now, before I forget, make sure that you are subscribed and that you have notifications turned on, and when you see a video of mine, you give it a thumbs up and drop a comment. We will be discussing this and more tonight during our Sunday night Viva and Barnes Law extravaganza. If you like what I do, you know what to do. If you want to support the channel, Viva Frei for some amazing merch. Never forgive, never forget what they tried to do to Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Not just to Trump, but to the world in which we live. Never forget Corey Caporatore, who was murdered that day. Never forget David Dutch and James Copenhaver, who were grievously wounded that day. Never forgive, never forget. If you want to join our wonderful community at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, that is where to do it. But more important than anything, exercise, eat healthy, sunlight, talk to people in real life, get outside, and now you know your vlog. See you tonight, peeps. Booyah!
Remember, Judge Cannon found in her ruling that Jack Smith, in his appointment as special prosecutor, that very appointment was unconstitutional. That is what Judge Eileen Cannon found, thus dismissing the indictment against Trump in the classified documents case. Well, now Jack Smith is urging the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to reverse that ruling by Judge Cannon.